Welcome to the Beyond the Reef podcast, where I talk to experts and researchers in the reef aquarium hobby, discussing a broad range of topics from corals and reef biology to water chemistry and equipment. We take a deep dive into our guests' methods, techniques, and top reef keeping tips. My name is Adam Sutherland, and I am the owner-operator of Frag Garage Corals, based out of British Columbia, Canada. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Reef. Today we are giving you the second episode of the Coral Care series with Chris Meckley from ACI Aquaculture. So we were hoping to get through the rest of the SPS, but we pretty much just had to get through Acropora on this one. So if you're waiting for LPS and softies and other stuff, it's coming. It's just gonna take a little longer. And this episode we went through some of the stubby corals, the deep water, smooth skin acros, which I should make that differentiation because smooth skin does not always mean deep water. And we talked about staghorns, Tortuosa, things like that. We really covered, I'd say, most of the species that are common in our aquariums, and hopefully we didn't miss too much, but I think there's a lot of good information here. And also there are quite a few photos and videos in this, so if you're following along on YouTube, it should be a good one to watch. I'd like to thank contributors from Reef Builders, Nicole Helgeson, Vincent Chalias for providing me with some of the images that I needed. And some of the ones that I didn't credit are just going to be, just assume they're my photos and videos. And I hope you enjoyed this episode, and remember to like, share, subscribe. Definitely hit subscribe because I feel like the numbers don't line up with the subscribers for views on this channel. So that would really help me out. And if you want to make a financial contribution, you can send a payment to our PayPal at beyondthereefpod@gmail.com. You can also sign up to be a Patreon member, and we are going to have some perks for Patreon members pretty soon. And that is at patreon.com/beyondthereefpodcast. Well, I hope all you stickheads out there enjoyed this episode with Chris Meckley from ACI Aquaculture. All right, so a couple things I wanted to just do a little housekeeping first, because there was a few comments that straightened out the Befaria tenuis thing in regards to Fiji. So apparently Fiji, that's where the original holotype was named. So Fiji's going to remain to be tenuis in Fiji. And it looks like the same with hyacinthus as well from Fiji.
It makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, where we see tenuis and hyacinthus from first. Mm-hmm. It was Fiji corals over, for 25, 30 years, there was, Fiji corals coming in, and that was where hyacinthus and tenuis were most commonly known from. And of course, they started farming them in Bali 20 years ago. So, it's been just continuing to keep, keep the name going. But then now that we know that there's different species, I mean, it makes sense to me. I mean, they're so far apart, there's no way
that's true
that in all the, tens of thousands of years that species been around, that it hasn't, changed because of genetics, being isolated in specific areas, which is, it's just nuts because there's going to be so many corals.
Yeah. Totally. Well, and that explains kind of like the Great Barrier Reef, because like a lot of the Great Barrier Reef developed about 10,000 to I think 12,000 years ago or something, which is pretty recent when you think about it. I think it was kind of like bayou and marshlands, or kind of, kind of like those mangrove kind of areas. And then when the sea levels came back, like all of that stuff developed into the Great Barrier Reef. And you get this huge, all this influx of stuff coming from Papua New Guinea and, all these different, I guess, like, larvae and stuff. And you got this whole unique set of biology, which is pretty cool. That's why we see some cool stuff from Oz for sure.
I agree. I agree. Indonesia's still the Mecca.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I mean, species diversity. Yeah. I wish I could brighten myself up in here, but I can't.
Yeah.
I haven't figured it out.
That's all right. Okay. Anyways, so the first one I got on the list for today is, unless there's anything else you wanted to address that you think we needed to look at from last time.
Donei.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Donei or Donei. Yeah. So you know which one I'm talking about now, as far as the Australian one?
I do. I was thinking it was something completely different. But now that I remember hearing Vincent talk about it, and I hear Nick DeSantos was talking about it, and I've got a handful of them that are from Australia. Mm-hmm. We have one called Tequila Sunrise. It's very popular. It's distinctly that coral after I started comparing it.
Yeah, so, you named it you named it a different species on your ACI site.
I don't remember what I named it now.
Yeah.
Because now I went, believe me, ever since we had our first chat, the first part of this, my head's been spinning because it's getting me back into getting the species names down. And I got out of it for a while because I didn't really have anybody to talk about it with, you know. And it
you got me now.
yeah. So I appreciate that part of it. You're bringing back something that, you know, it was very near and dear to me for a long time, and kind of got away from it. So it helps keep the passion rolling.
Yeah. So the Donei or Donei, I don't know how we say it, but we actually talked about this in the last convo, and then I edited it out. So anybody watching would have missed that part. But so pretty awesome species as far as the ones from Australia, because they've got like the pink base or the purple base or the blue base, and then an orange polyp or, you know, pink polyp. Like pretty nice variation in color.
Super bright.
Yeah.
The contrasts are really what make that coral. I mean, ours has bright orange polyps, bright purple tips, and like this mauve pink colored body. Some people say it's something else, and I'm like, I don't care what everybody says it is. It came from the wild. For me, I've got the import permit to, you know, to back it up. So if you want to call it what you want to call it, but it doesn't mean that the DNA is the same and mean it's the same coral.
Yeah.
You know, is it possible? Yes, it is. It's just like the mariculture stuff. You know, there's going to be a lot of the same corals coming in that are going to be all called different because somebody else has it.
Yeah. But for all intents and purposes, we're calling it Donei for now. And, yeah, I mean, I would say it's a pretty easy piece to keep, but I have seen periods of time with it where it really struggles for some reason, and then it will bounce back. And I don't know if there's just something about our water chemistry that they're super sensitive to. Like, they don't die easily. They just, to really thrive, there's something about water chemistry, you know, that really gets them happy.
That was one of the corals that I had just puddling and just kept growing across the tile. Then it would grow under the tile. Then it would get vertical growth, but no branching. Yeah. You know, and I stabbed it. And that's one of the ones that we were able to release, I think, 3 months later. Yeah. Because you just shot out so many branches.
Yeah, you just had such a massive base, just like exploding.
Yeah. It's going to be unfortunate, though. I won't be able to get to see it grow out completely because it's become so popular. It might take a year or two of people not being as popular as of a coral that I'm selling for to start growing properly.
Yeah, you don't get to see. What did you say you call the one that you sell?
It's called the Tequila Sunrise.
Yeah, cool. Okay, because I've seen some of the other trade names are Merlin Staff. The ARC Fireworks is one of them. In Canada, we have this Rainbow Sherbet that we call it. That's probably similar.
I have the ARC Fireworks.
Yeah,
it's different than what I have. It's definitely different. I have them growing right next to each other. The colors are very similar, but there's subtle differences. And being in the same conditions, I would expect them, if they were the same coral, to not have any subtle differences that make them unique.
You think they're different species? I mean, I know they're definitely different morphs.
I think it's just a different genotype.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's each individual larva, when it settles, it's its own genotype. You know, even though it might look very similar to the one right next to it, there are differences. And that's what makes this part so difficult when it comes to, okay, well, you call it this. Well, why does he call it this? Put them right next to each other, grow them, and see what they do. And I had to do it with ours before I decided to name it something other than Fireworks, because it's definitely different.
Yeah. No, I agree. They're definitely different genotypes. I have heard of people having success splicing these corals. Whether accidentally or on purpose, where they've actually accepted two different colors or strains have accepted each other.
Just grow right next to each other.
Yeah, and actually, like, the tissue's actually blended, not just formed a wall or whatever between them. So that's a cool thing people could experiment with if you've got a couple of those different morphs of that species. You know, mess around with that a little bit.
People try to do it with Montes all the time, but getting the same. There's so many species of Monte, and a lot of them. Most people don't get them grown out big enough to see that they're different species. Yeah. You know, because sometimes a frag that's 2 inches next to another frag that's 2 inches, they might look like the same species, but they grow out and they're different species by that, the mature growth.
Yeah, totally. Or different genotypes. I mean, they may be, yeah.
If they're the same genotype and same
yeah.
I'm sorry. I meant to say if they're the same species but different genotype, they should have no problems fusing. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd think, cool. but yeah. Anyways, okay. So what would you say difficulty? I would put it at like a 5 because it's still not like, I wouldn't call it like a beginner SPS, but it's not a difficult one either. And
I say for SPS keepers, a 5 is good.
Yeah. And par range for me with mostly LED lighting, I would put it anywhere from 300 to 450. It can handle a lot of light. You probably can put it right under your halides. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets cooked. I mean, it gets a lot of light. So, and that's one of the ones I'm going to experiment with the new fixtures that just came. Mm-hmm. Pretty excited about them.
Cool. What were the new fixtures again? Did you mention those?
1,000 waters.
Oh, the 1,000 waters. Holy crap.
they just arrived.
Okay, that sounds fun. And then like nutrients and whatnot, I'd say they're in that pretty standard SPS range of, just good balanced nutrients. Can't be rock bottom. Exactly. You need something, and there you go. Exactly. And then this kind of segues into the next one, which we touched on but didn't really complete, was there's an Acropora Donei from Bali that's from Vincent's farm. And it looks a little bit like, I would say it's a different species than these Aussie ones, but it looks a little bit like Acropora Convexa in terms, maybe not the coralite structure, but the coloration is similar, because I received a piece from him and I have PC Rainbow, which as far as I know is Acropora Convexa, and I have them both in the same system and they're quite similar. So I don't know. We could just talk about Convexa, I guess, next and just quickly get through that one.
It's one of those species that I question what people call it, certain pieces, Convexa. But I do that with a lot of them because I don't think we really know, but it's good to try and at least put it in the category like we're doing here. I mean, I think that there's so much diversity there that we just don't have a clue, but our best guess is better than no guess.
Yeah, we're just going to push forward as if we're not going to say we absolutely know, but we're going to just say with the best confidence we have, this is what we know based on our combined minds looking at this. So let's not be too hard on ourselves.
Right. Yeah. But Convexa, people used to think it was a staghorn, but it's kind of like it's a cross between a staghorn and a bushy.
Yeah, totally.
It doesn't actually stag out like, say, a Formosa or a Hoaxami or Tortuosa would, but it stays tighter and thinner, but does still look like a pretty cool looking staghorn.
Yeah, I think what that comes down to is the amount of axial tips that are put out. Like if you look at like a stag, and I was going to talk about this with stags, but there's almost like a predictable nature to the splitting. If you have a stag that's grown in a really consistent condition, I've actually looked, I haven't put in a ruler to it, but it's like almost every 1.25 inches or something on like, let's say a really common stag, like Formosa or something. Yeah, or Yongei or something. Yeah, it's going to have like the growth grows and then it splits off and then it grows and it splits off in a predictable way. But like with the Convexa, it seems to want to put tips out in whatever way it feels like. Probably in nature, it's more consistent, but in our tanks, it's kind of just like, yeah, whatever. I'll throw some tips out,
Yep. Yeah. It's that was one I had really good success with, especially the PC Rainbow for years, and for whatever reason, it shut down completely on me. And it's been weird. I think 2 years since we've had it on the market because it just wasn't growing. It wouldn't do anything. And then all of a sudden, just, I don't know, probably since the beginning of the year, it just started all of a sudden taking off again. And it's nice because we didn't have a whole lot left because, like I said, for whatever reason, it kind of shut down and we were losing some of it. We couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. And then we took some main branch tips and just glued them to new tiles. And they're the ones that are doing amazing, but all of the others didn't do well. Now it's nice to see them grow into the colonies like they should before I'm able to frag them, because they're only about the size of your, they're small right now.
Yeah.
Give it another 3 months and we'll have like 4 or 5 small colonies to frag up. But it's really neat to watch it grow out properly.
What's your experience with the like metallic colors in the base on Convexa? Because mine grows like crazy, but I don't get a ton of that metallic color in the base. And I talked to a few people about what that is, and some people said lower light. You know, I thought if it's something to do with metals and trace elements, but I at this point I've tried so many things, I honestly don't know.
I think that under just straight halides, it doesn't get all of that.
Yeah.
If I have it under it's I think it's the blue light, because it's how they adapt. You know, that is one coral that I have to say, if it's underneath LEDs, it seems to pop a lot more. Mm-hmm. Even, you know, if I'm growing it under the halides and I put it under the blue LEDs, it doesn't pop as much. It takes a couple of weeks for all that shimmer and shine to come into it. That's I think one of the exceptions to the rule that I've always said about halides make them color up just as good, if not better than LEDs do.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how that, you know, can be both ways.
Yeah, totally.
But I think it has to do with our LEDs. That's the reason why we see all that craziness, shimmering and shininess in the bases of it, for sure.
Yeah, it could be possibly. Okay. Well, people in the comments, if you have experience with growing it under different lighting and seeing how that coloration, because that's the best part of that coral. Otherwise, it's just kind of a red, kind of bushy stag that, I mean, it's all right, but, you know, it's, yeah. So what would you say for difficulty level? I would put it at like a 3. It's pretty easy. It's hard to kill, I would say.
It is hard to kill. I used to think that, but
then you had trouble with it.
I put it at a 5.
Yeah,
I put it at a 5 because, you know, it did so well for so long, and then it was just. But now it's coming back, so I feel comfortable that it's going to be back and going to be fine. But I got another genotype of that coral from one of my suppliers. He said, I think this is different, and he sent it to me. He said, keep this for yourself. Mm-hmm. Well, you know how the PC rainbow gets, you know, gets some green, yellow, and the gold, the orange. Yeah. You know, it's got all that insane. This gets on the new growth edges, sapphire blue.
I've seen then versions with green. The blue. Yeah.
Yeah. Then it goes to green. Then it goes to like the yellow and the orange, the red, the gold, whatever you want to call it. But that blue ring really sets the coral off, and especially when the frag's only like this big and you see this little red stick sticking up in the middle, and then you get this rainbow coming off the base of it. Yeah. It's a pretty cool coral. But yeah, it's there's not many genotypes that I can think of.
Not that I've seen. I haven't seen like a green version or, you know, any other colors. It's typically that the main color is the red. But yeah, for it to earn the rainbow name, I feel like it's got to have, you know, like the one you were talking about. That's probably more like a true PC rainbow. But you know, yeah, marketing words, you know,
marketing words. Yeah, it's crazy what they can do and the power of them.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else to say about it? Lighting, I feel like it'll do pretty well under lower light, and it can handle high light, so that's fine. Yeah. Flow is probably going to determine the growth structure a little bit, like we were talking about. I mean, it can handle high or lower flow, but you're probably going to get more axial new growth tips if it's under higher flow. And then, yeah, pretty standard for nutrients and whatnot. Yeah. Pretty good classic coral. Okay, speaking of classic corals, let's go to the next one. This will be a fun one to talk about, is Pearlberry. Well, not a species. I'm saying the common name first because we need to talk about what species it is. So there's a thread on Reef to Reef where they suggested that it could be Desalwi, which I don't really agree with, or Batunai, which would be, I guess, from a different region, which I also don't agree with. I think it's Insignis. I don't know if you've looked at pictures of Insignis from Corals of the World, but
I have. It's possible. I used to think it was Plana, but then I said there's no way, because it's just you know. But Plana has that light body like they have, like the Pearlberry does. And I wish I've seen some Plana that has been grown out that I knew was Plana when it was put on a tile, but I haven't seen any real Acropora Plana come in a long time. And I say you might be right on this Insignis part of it.
Yeah, I just sent you I don't know if you can check your phone, but I just sent you a link to it. And to me, that looks like that's from the Corals of the World site. And to me, that looks quite a bit like Pearlberry. At least close enough.
Yeah, it's very close.
Yeah. And I
It's
kind
very
of
close, but
feel
the
like,
tips.
yeah, the tips look a little different. And, I don't know how much these things morph or change in our systems, but,
Agreed.
that's another thing. But
That thing's,
yeah.
if it really is the OG Pearlberry like the one we have, it's distinctly different than the one that they're selling as Pearlberry now.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of bummer, because they asked for Pearlberry back and they launched it again on the site, and it's not even Pearlberry. It's
Really?
They're
just like
an imposter. It's an imposter.
Jeez, guys.
I mean, I'd be happy to give them a small colony of it back, so they had it. I mean, ORA Pearlberry has been a big part of ACI for a long time.
Yeah.
In Cygnus, very, very good and possible that it is in Cygnus. There was and Plana is just not. The coral lights are too big.
The polyps are totally different too. Yeah, Plana's got
Exactly.
big, beefier polyps. Yeah, Plana's a cool one. We should maybe talk about that. But so Pearlberry, to me, it looks like a coral that was maybe collected from Fiji or Australia. I wouldn't say it's an Indonesian coral, but
I knew this story a long time ago. I just don't remember what it is. Because they had it pretty much. I think you can probably find it on ORA's website. They might have the story of the Pearlberry.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, they used to. I thought like that was one of the things that would make them. They could tell you the story about the coral. And that was the whole point of having a lineage coral was. And then that all went down the tube when everything started getting named.
Yeah, but it was one of the early named corals, and probably 15 plus years ago it came into the hobby.
20,
maybe 20. Yeah.
I mean, I remember the Pearlberry when I was just a hobbyist, and a Scripps Millie. I mean, what happened to that?
I don't remember that one. But yeah, so I would say the difficulty level is kind of somewhere in the middle. Like, I think to get the really awesome coloration on it, like I would push the difficulty to be a little bit higher, but it is a hardy coral. So like, I'm going to say a 5 or a 6, maybe.
I'm putting it up there higher than that because, I mean, for the original farm to have it and they lose it, I almost lost mine. I don't know how many times. I mean, we had it growing for 2 years and then it grew into 2 frags from like this big, grew into 2 beautiful colonies, and we put it up for sale. After it was fragged, we sold a lot of the frags, and then all of a sudden they just started browning out. The mother colonies browned out, and it was probably another year and a half, 2 years before they got color back into them. And it was another one of those corals that you'd think wouldn't be an issue, and all of a sudden it was. I'm going to put it at a 7 or 8 because keeping the color in it is definitely not the easiest. I mean, when I moved it from the one system, put it through quarantine, in the process, because of all the issues we were having with it in one system, I moved it to another system thinking maybe that would change things, and then nothing changed. They still were having a hard time. I couldn't get the color in. They were just brown. And then literally they both started changing colors almost exactly at the same time in both systems. So I don't know. It's a weird coral for me.
Yeah. You said this was after doing a lot of fragging, because we talked about this a bit last time, is maybe like a coral can only take so much fragging until a point where like something changes in the microbiome or something where it's maybe more vulnerable to, a bad change in its microbiome, that maybe that's why they browned out, like it could be something along those lines. Yeah.
Even the frags browned out though. That's the thing.
Oh yeah. Huh.
So we had like 120 frags off the 2 colonies.
Whoa, big colonies.
Yeah. They were decent size. And I'd say 50% of the frags browned out before we sold them all. And then we had problems with them and we were losing them. And then they got lost in translation with a handful of other corals that weren't doing well. And when everything started coloring back up on the Pearlberry side of it from both systems, then the frags started coloring up. It's easy to tell the difference. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. PAR, I think, has a lot to do with the coloration. Like, I think it can handle high PAR. It almost gets that like white. I mean, if we're talking
white,
it's
blue.
Like that white edge, that pearliness. That's where you get the pearliness. So mine in my system are probably around. They're actually not super high PAR. I could probably put them up a little. They're probably around 350, but they look really good around there. So.
Mine are off to the edge of a 2-foot wide rack that has halides in the center of it, and it probably gets about 500. But that's not on both sides. That's the thing, is that on the other side, it's just getting constant, T5 lighting, and they just glow when they're happy.
Yeah, totally. And anything else about them as far as, I mean, because they're a bushy, we're put them in the bushy category. I think
Definitely.
they like quite a bit of flow. I think it's like,
Sure.
definitely like to get
Moderate to high.
Yeah, moderate to high. Pretty standard for nutrient kind of profile. I think maybe they might not do as well in a system with like the higher nutrients, but I don't have experience with that. So,
And
yeah.
my experience with them, for sure, has been people that have bought them from me that have put them on straight LEDs that used all blues. Even though it was a high par and just all blues, they just didn't see that white shimmery shine nearly as much.
Mm-hmm.
So they do like their white spectrum.
Yeah.
They like that white. They like the greens, the reds, the oranges. That's something super important for them to get that pearly look to it. At least, for 2 or 3 hours a day, having it peak out with all the whites on is going to be key. I mean, look at Sanjay's tank. It's 10 hours of
yeah, totally.
100%.
Yeah, because I think what's happening is you're kind of that's limiting the zooxanthellae from populating those parts of the upper branches.
Exactly.
And that's why you see that cool kind of expression of the pearly tops. Yeah, totally.
You get a lot more green if it's just straight blues on it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I would also, just as a side note, I'd put this coral as like maybe a top 10 all-time kind of classic SPS. Definitely one of the go-to bests.
One of the few I would definitely call an OG.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's go to next one. I grouped these two together because I think, in my opinion, they're a bit of a similar species and similar care. So that's Acropora Aculeus and Chesterfieldensis, which are sometimes kind of called the glow stick type corals. And they're like neon bright yellow-green with usually like a white polyp.
What, Aculeus?
Yeah, Aculeus.
Man, the ones that we used to get from Fiji back in the day were yellow.
Yeah, like a yellowy pink edges. Huh.
Yes. I remember them distinctly because I remember the first time. Nope, I'm sorry. I'm mixing that with a Verwii. Aculeus. Okay, yes. Yellow. We did get yellow ones, and they had polyps were clear on the tip, if I remember correctly, just like most corals are. But the polyps were green.
Yeah, I think I've seen them be green and I've seen them be white. So depending on the morph or whatever. But there's a common type that comes out of Oz that's like there's not a lot of difference in the the different morphs. It's kind of just like you get the one type and it looks that way and that's it. There's not a lot of variation. But yeah, Chesterfieldensis is a similar species from just looking at them and from caring
more
for
branchy.
them. Yeah, so the Aculeus seems to be more of a table, and the Chesterfieldensis seems to be more of a branchy bush kind of thing. But probably
Aculeus is such a weird. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's such a weird coral in its growth. It's like a table, but it's a bush.
Yeah, totally bushy
It's
table.
like kind of like most tables are. They come up with a main and then they just kind of fan out and get thin.
Mm-hmm.
Where Aculeus tends to be kind of like a pillow cushion almost,
Totally.
but flat on the top, like a table. So yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, and actually,
pretty cool point about them.
That makes me think too is they're really bad for collecting detritus because of that. So you really need thorough flow around them. I actually just noticed a couple of my colonies have some kind of dead spots there's some algae growing in the middle, and it's like, they're probably just not getting enough flow. So I think they really need a lot for sure.
They don't ship well.
No. Yeah.
No. At least my experience.
Yeah, the Aussie ones have shipped fine for me, but I know
they groom them.
Yeah, and we see them from Fiji. We see them from probably a different species, but a variation from Indo, and I've seen obviously the Aussie ones. So these could all be different species, but like technically they look.
What we know right now.
Yeah, to what we know right now, we can agree they're kind of similar characteristics. But yeah, it can be. I'd say I would put it a little bit more on the difficult scale because
for sure
I've put frags in other systems that are my, like I have a tank at the local fish store. I'm like, I'll just throw one in there, and it didn't survive. So it's like, it wasn't able to prove itself as like just a throw it in whatever tank kind of coral. So I'm going to put it as like a 6 or a 7 in terms of difficulty. But the coloration is easy to achieve. I'd say it's more just like getting it to really thrive is a little bit harder.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I only have 1 or 2 Aculeus on the farm, but of course I'm very picky with what goes on there too. So it has to have the right colors. But it's it's good. It's definitely I'm gonna go 8.
Yeah,
because of I think the biggest problem with that coral is you can get a fragment of it and it can do extremely well as soon as it starts puddling and growing. If you don't have adequate flow in the tank for it, as it grows, it will just die at the base.
Yeah.
Because it just has so many branches and it's different. It's unique. Flow is going to be super key for its long-term success in an aquarium. Yeah. That's why I'm going to put it at an 8.
Okay.
In the beginning, no problems, but long-term, that's where I want to see somebody with a colony that's a foot across.
Yeah. I've got a couple that have grown from frags that are good sort of 6-inch colonies. But like I said, there's a bit of dead spots in the middle, so I need to chop them up or do a better job. One of those 2 things.
Hey, always learning, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the similar species I talked about, the Chesterfieldensis, I used to have, that has more color variance than just the greeny yellow kind of type, but
it gets blue in it.
Yeah, I remember there was one that we used to trade around my area in Western Canada, and every time I grew a frag to about let's say a baseball size, it would grow great and be awesome, and then it would RTN when it got a little bigger than that. It was just it must have been something to do with the flow, and then you chop it up and you could usually save some pieces of it, but. So yeah, I'd say it's just, again, it's that thorough flow through the whole thing, flushing that coral, that really kind of probably leads to the best output.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have to agree. It's a beautiful coral though. It's just not something that's super common.
Yeah.
I wish people knew the Latin names of the corals. It'd be so much better because people are like, hey, can I get some Chesterfield from you?
Yeah. Hey, I mean, that's why we're doing this, man.
It is 100%. And hopefully people catch on to it and they start learning their Latin names. Because that's probably the most important part of what we do. We need that. We need the what is it? I said it earlier on some post. We need the Latin names to gain knowledge of the hobby and the industry and what we have, and it's the Looney Tune names that are what make the money, right? Yeah, and for sharing knowledge too. It's you need to be able to talk about the species, not so much just the trade name. I think it's rare though to have geeks like you and me or Jake or a Paletta or Sanjay. That's maybe 5% of the hobby when you break it down. Yeah. But that might be the part of the hobby that's the most obsessed, that is the more likely to watch a Reef podcast like this. We are the saving grace for the hobby when you break it down. I mean, because when all the Looney Tune names are gone, I'm still going to be looking at corals. I'm still going to be wanting to learn about corals, and you're still going to want to do it, and we'll be talking about it. But it won't be this hot commodity anymore. And I wish it wouldn't be considered a commodity, because it's really not, because we're dealing with life. Yeah, totally. But applicable knowledge. Let's keep having fun. Yeah. Okay, the next one, this is I guess a bit of a sentimental one. So Acropora Florida. Yes. Yeah, and I can say, so you got Jake's Slimer. I have, I'd say, the exact same morph that I've been growing for a really long time, and it's one of the most metallic, bright green yellow acros that I've ever had. It's just crazy metallic. Doesn't matter what you do to it. I mean, you can put it in most intense lighting and it'll be almost a yellowish color, or you can put it in low lighting and it'll just turn a super insane bright green, like rivals Valley Green Slimer. I mean, when you think of a toxic neon green coral, you think of Valley Green Slimer, but this Acropora Florida, and Jake had the whole story. I have it somewhere, but it's like 30 years, 20 years at least in captivity. And I think it was in the 90s. It was it's over 30 years in captivity soon. Mid 90s was when it was collected, and somebody started growing it out, and Jake got a piece of it a long time ago. Yeah. And this coral grows fast, but nobody ever, I'm afraid that nobody's ever going to see its true beauty because nobody has a big enough aquarium for it.
Yeah. Well, actually, I have a funny story about that piece, and I wonder if mine is the same strain that Jake had, because I went to, this is maybe like 2003 or something. I went to go see Eric Borneman did a lecture in Seattle, and I took the ferry over, and there was another reefer. He was a big Reef Central guy, Kevin Povich maybe. And he gave me a little piece of this toxic kind of like Slimer Florida, and I took it back home in a water bottle. I mean, maybe I should edit this out.
It was smaller than an inch, so you're good.
Yeah, yeah, and that was the piece that I had, and I at one point lost it for whatever reason. I mean, I was a young guy in my 20s, like, you know, touring in bands and stuff, so I wasn't as on top of my reef tank for a few years there, but I got a piece back, and you got to wonder, I mean, maybe we have the same strain from way back.
Very well could
possible.
Be. I'm pretty sure it was out west, northwest, Pacific Northwest was where it was originated, and where the person was growing it. But the branches will get as thick as your arm.
Really?
You know?
Yeah.
This was a Solomon Island coral too. So when I remember seeing the videos in the wild of the coral, I mean, literally the branches are as thick as your forearm. And then all these little short branches come off of it the whole way around it. So it's like a thick bottle brush, but it's like, you know, that's big around when it's all said and done by the way the branch tips, all the little axial correlates that pop up off the main branch. That's what I love about the coral, because it's just, to see it grow like that is going to be difficult for most hobbyists because it needs to have some space to actually grow. Yeah. It's like, you know, palmetto needs a ton of space to grow down in the Caribbean, but this doesn't need nearly what that does, but it needs, a good square foot of space, to actually turn into something that looks like the real species would look, and why it is what it is and what makes it so unique.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's actually cool. Now that I think about it, there aren't that many corals where the original branches just get as wide as they possibly want. Like there's no limit. It just seems to get, like you say, it gets so wide and thick. And then all the little branches just want to shoot out everywhere outside of it. So, yeah.
But what's so darn cool about it is, the base gets so insanely large on it, so it can handle having all these monster branches coming off of it. Yeah. But the distance between the branches on the main colony, you have a main branch coming off, and then you have another branch coming out to the side, but the distance between them, like when you were mentioning on stags, 1.5 inches was about the spread. Yeah. You're talking like a foot of spread before you get a new branch growing on some of these pieces in the wild. And that is where it's going to be difficult. Like a public aquarium, I'm going to send a whole bunch of this stuff up to Georgia Aquarium, hopefully, with their new exhibit that they're putting in. I want to see them take it eventually and then put it into their main 156,000 gallon exhibit and actually watch it grow into what it's supposed to on a balmy in the middle of the tank or something.
Yeah, it's really cool. 5 years. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah,
totally,
definitely.
I would say that I've seen these come in from. I've seen Florida come in from Indo, and it tends to have an orange tip when the ones that come in from Indo, and they're really nice too. I would say they're similar to the.
I've never seen one with the orange tip. Yeah, that reminds me of like Ceramentosa usually has orange tips, and I can see why it would be confused as a Florida. Yeah, as a small piece, but. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see the orange tip ones. I get them from Bali as well, and they're always just straight green, like this one.
Yeah, well,
but not as intense.
I've got another one that's green, like a deeper green with what looks like more of a bluish purple tip, and it looks like Acropora Florida as well. But I'll put a little clip of it in the video, and people can see if they agree. I'll put question mark.
That's cool.
But I would say on the easy to hard scale, like it's pretty easy. It's like a 2.
Yeah, it does. It is another one of those corals that is going to require, large amounts of flow, not just pointing straight at it, but it's going to have good water movement around it for it to show you what it can do. That's the key. If you want that coral to actually do what it's supposed to and grow properly, water flow is going to be the key for you, of course, with lighting and water parameters. But good alternating flow will definitely make that coral one of your favorites in a tank. You got to see it from across the damn room. That's what I love about certain corals.
Yeah, anything with that super metallic fluorescence is yeah, is always
Agreed.
a good asset in that situation. Yeah, so we said lighting was kind of a range. Like it'll do fine in super high. It'll just look different in lower, but it's not, yeah. Like in my tank, it's probably under about 400, and I like the way it looks.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I have it all over the place. It gets a range from like 700 down to 350, 400, depending on. I mean, I have some of the colonies that are just got too big. They're down on the second rack below, so they just don't get nearly the light, but they don't look much different.
Yeah.
So
cool. Okay. I think we're into the stags now. So I don't know if we should split some of these up or group a few that we think are similar together, because I just wrote these all in the same line, but Yongei, Formosa, Abrolhosensis, which I think it's a pretty different,
Abrolhosensis. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
I don't know, maybe I just spelled.
Abrolhosensis.
I'll have to look it up.
I think it's all it is.
Okay.
Yeah, believe me, getting all the Latin names spelled correctly.
Yeah. Oh, you got your book out.
Yeah, I had to.
Another cool stag that doesn't even need a trade name because it's an awesome name is Exquisita. I feel like that one should just always just be called Exquisita. And Muricata, which I think is pretty similar to Formosa. I don't know if that's a...
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's very similar. What about Plumosa?
Don't think I know that one.
Yeah, it's because we don't ever get it, because if you look up Plumosa, it'll blow your mind. I mean, it's got one of the coolest freaking growth structures. It grows just like a stag, but it grows perfectly flat.
Interesting.
Kind of like Tortuosa is another one that grows kind of like a Formosa, but grows perfectly flat tables. And none of the branches, only a few areas where branches actually interconnect. I actually have Jake's Tortuosa here that came out of Fiji about
where they interconnect. So you'd think that the coral would be more susceptible to breakage in the wild, but
you'd think it would be.
Yeah. I guess if the growth is robust enough, then it just
Abrolhosensis.
Weird. Okay, maybe I just spelled it wrong. Anyways.
Yeah, that's all it is. Abrol. I can't see. Hosensis.
Okay, it does have that extra. Okay, Abrolhosensis. Okay. Yeah. Well, I've been saying it wrong forever, but that's why we're doing this.
I didn't get it correct until probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And Jake and I were sitting around. We were actually laughing about it. It was before he passed. We were sitting at the studio, and he's going, Abrolho. I'm going, Abrolho. He's like, Census. And I'm like, shut up. You are definitely speaking Greek to me. We were drinking. We were having a good time, rolling around on chairs, and he just said, he's like, it's Abrolhosensis. And I'm like, okay, I got it. I'll never mispronounce it ever again.
Yeah.
But this Plumosa, if you ever get it, if you get a chance to look it up, I gotta make sure that I'm looking at thinking of the right coral here.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
Because it's a really cool stag.
That is really cool. Yeah, totally. It's like a stag that plates or tables. Yeah.
Yes.
Neat.
Okay. And I am.
But like you say, not one that we would have in our tanks super often, right?
Yeah, it's pretty much brown. Jake said he saw it in the wild, and it's just basically a gray or brown coral, and he's seen huge, massive tables of it.
Yeah. And
it's always in a lagoon where there's never not any heavy wave action. Yeah. Now Formosa, that is got to be one of the most resilient freaking corals you can put in your aquarium. It's probably one of the hardiest corals I've ever seen. I mean, when I was at the lagoons with Vincent in Candidasa, north of Bali.
Yeah, Candidasa. Yeah, I've been there too.
You've been there too?
Yeah.
You saw the Formosa out of the water there.
Oh yeah. And I mean, there was this old area where they were farming the corals when they first set the farm up, and then they're like, no, we're going to move it to the shallower water, and they left some of those racks there, and they're just covered in Formosa, like just massive colonies. And that's only after a couple of years, not even a huge amount of time.
Did you see the macroalgae that mimics?
Yeah. Vincent showed me that, and I didn't think one of the coolest things I was going to see when I saw that farm was going to be algae, but yeah. So people that don't know about it, I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but because I think Nicole did an article on it, but it's basically like a mimic algae that tries to look like Acropora Formosa, so that the fish, I guess, think it's coral and don't eat the algae. So yeah, it's wild.
Well, what did you think about the colonies of Formosa that were in amongst that reef right there? It was right over the reef crest. And I remember being there at low tide and the waves just barely coming over the surface. The tridacnid clams out of the water, squirting every time the waves would come over top of them. And in the Formosa colonies, and, we're talking about, buses.
Yeah.
The length of a bus. And what'd you think about the damsels that had their holes in the sides of the colonies where they would not allow the coral to grow and they farmed their algae in there?
Oh, I don't think I saw that. That's interesting.
Oh, I asked Vincent, I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Because him and I went out and went zigzagging through the reef. And these big Sergeant Major damsels they had like hollowed out areas in the Acropora colony that was just for them to harvest and grow their algae. And they had this algae growing there around it, the stuff that looked like Formosa.
Wow.
And it was pretty cool because there was holes throughout the entire area where I was looking at them. I actually collected a couple of corals off of that reef for the farm.
Cool.
Did you?
No, that was the day I arrived was the Indo export ban. So I arrived on May 4th, 2018.
Oh, wow. You came after, before me. I literally came, the ban happened and I came to Bali I was there for 4 days and I was in Jakarta for 4 days and I was in Philippines for 3 days. So I left on, I think the 17th and I ended my visit at the end of May. Mm-hmm. Came home. I got home on, I guess, June 2nd.
Yeah. Wow. We just missed each other. That's crazy.
I thought you were there since then.
Yeah.
So you weren't even there for him to launch the Ocean Gardener.
No, I went back last February.
Oh, you did?
We were
okay.
There. So
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So that was my second trip
awesome.
there. But yeah, so Formosa, I mean, yeah, like there's so many different color variants. Like, I've got a really nice like cobalt blue. I've seen like there's lots of teals, turquoise, purple. The purple I haven't seen in a while, and I'd like to get it in Canada. You have it, yeah. So Formosa, yeah. Would you say? I would say it's like a two for care.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely it'd be one of the first acros I would recommend anybody jumping into getting acros. If you can't keep a Formosa alive, especially some of the ones that have been in captivity for a long time, then think about trying something different.
Yeah.
Or figure out what you're doing wrong before you try acros again.
Yeah, and I think part of that is that stags are probably a little less picky about flow, just because of the nature of the branches. There's more space for flow to get around. It's not like those tight bushy types. So, that would kind of make sense. Well,
the higher the flow that they're in, the thicker that they get. I mean, that's a given. Totally. The low flow, you can grow them. They'll grow pretty quickly in low flow, but they'll be really thin compared to something like, that purple that we have, it slimes like crazy, and it is super thick because of where we have it growing. And I was hoping that was going to be the case. It would keep it from getting all lanky. I wanted to get a good firm base before it starts shooting up all those branches.
Yeah. Actually, thinking of Formosa too, that's one of those pieces that I've seen it fall down in the back of the tank or like underneath the frag rack, and there's a piece there, and it's like, 6 months or a year later, it's still alive and it's actually growing, and it's like probably getting
growing on there
like 25, 50 par max, So that's just a testament to the fact that it's not super picky. But yeah, so okay, so we'll say like a 2 for that, and yeah, I mean, this is kind of nice grouping the stags together because some of this stuff applies to all of them, but we can just note if something seems different.
Right.
But yeah, so Yongei or Yongei, depending on how you say it, is the green slime species. Yeah.
Yongei. Yeah, I mean, I've never been good with the Latin pronunciations until you say it different than I say it.
Yeah.
different than somebody else says it. So I'm like, it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, and even hearing when I did my podcast with Jamie Craggs, I was like, that was weird how he said that. I think he called Millipora Miliapora, and I was like, I've never heard anybody say that. But you're the scientist, man. I should probably listen to you.
Well, I always hear the guys in Australia call it Miliapora too.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. It's more fun to say that way. Anyway, so Yongei is green slimer. We're gonna say like probably one of the, like we said in the first combo, one of the best first beginner corals if you're gonna try an SPS.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Abrolhosensis, that was a difficult one.
Yeah.
If you ask me. Well, I don't know I can't get mine to puddle. They will grow up all day long, but I can't get them to puddle.
I haven't had it in a while, but something I would compare about it to other staghorns is it has a lot more polyps per square inch than something like a Formosa. Like it's more fuzzy, a lot of polyps on it.
It's called the shaggy stag.
Yeah, the shaggy stag. Yeah.
That's what we call the first one that we got, which is basically just a brown with a blue tip. And the polyps are out continuously. It grows straight up, but never grows branches out. I mean, I've got sticks that are like 9-10 inches with no other branches on them.
Really?
And they just don't, it doesn't branch. I even tried an experiment by taking a thick piece of it and cutting that piece in half the whole way down and then laying it on its side, gluing it to a tile on the side. So it had all that extra surface area, and then it just encrusted.
Yeah. Weird. Yeah, I remember a friend had ID'd a coral he had as that species, and he's like, I've never seen anything like it. It's like it doesn't even have any tissue. It's just polyps. And I was like, it kind of looks that way.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to get Vincent to, back in the day, they used to send a lot of him from Bali, and actually it was maricultured regularly, and it just nobody wanted it anymore. They had a blue one. So it's a blue Abrolhosensis that's shaggy, just like the brown one with the blue tips. And I'm still trying to get it. And Vincent said, I used to know where there was a huge lagoon that had tons of it in. He's like, I went back, it's all gone.
Really? Wow. I wonder what the duration between his visits back there were. Like if it was that was
10 years.
Yeah.
He said there was tons of other corals growing.
Yeah.
I mean, there was tons of coral growing, but it was dominated by Abrolhosensis, the blue one. And he said, it was just been so long since I was there. He said, I'm sure it was there, but it's a big ass lagoon. So, did he just miss it? I'm imagining that's not hard to do when you're talking about a lagoon that's, half a mile wide by,
Yeah, unless you're going to the exact same spot. It's tricky. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but okay, so the Abrolhosensis, I would say, is a little bit more difficult just probably because of the nutrient demand. I mean, it's more like we said, more animals per square inch. So, I maybe put it at like a 4 or something, but I've grown giant colonies of it before. So, and, it was super hardy. So I'd still say it's pretty easy.
My green one seems to be the best grower that we have. It's just bright green. It's not like green slimer green, but it's a nice dark bright green.
Is it the green with the blue tip? Does it get a blue tip?
Yes, it does.
So yeah, that's the one in my when I had my tank was the Reef Central Tank of the Month or whatever. It was 2015. You can see the big green blue tip version in that tank, and it takes up, I don't know, like a huge amount of this 180-gallon tank. So it's a weed.
Nice. Yeah, I can't get the blue tips to come out on it unless it's under like 10K lighting. Yeah. That's when the blue tips are the best from me. But that's they're there, but I mean best by meaning they're long. They're not just a little nub for a blue tip. They're really nice.
Yeah. Like it's the blue extends further down. Yeah. This was grown under 400 watt metal halides or radiums. So
radiums. Yeah. I mean, I've gotten the blue tips to look really, really bright. Just not as long as they were under the 10Ks.
Yeah.
It all grows it really well. Metal halides especially, they love that intense lighting because they're shallow water corals for the most part. Most of the time they're found in lagoon areas because they can't handle heavy wave action. And the lagoons tend to be, depending on the lagoon, if it's where an estuary is, there's going to be a lot of nutrients coming into them. So it makes more sense why they would live in lagoons.
Yeah. we missed Exquisita. We didn't talk about it yet. So let's do that first. So
Yes.
I would put this as a little more of a difficult Staghorn because there's more nuances to the color. Like it's like a deep, deep blue purple color with these like yellowy highlights. And then it gets like a baby blue tip. It's like a tricolor stag.
Yes.
Yeah.
And coral lights are thin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it's usually a telltale sign of it being not in really intense water flow. But it's not a hard coral to keep from my experience when it comes to like, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of a different piece. Exquisita definitely is above a 6, maybe 7 for difficulty. I don't have any growing right now. Let's put it that way.
It's a slow grower for a stag. Yeah, sorry. It is a slower grower for a stag too. So as far from a farming perspective, it's, until you get a large enough mother colony that's got a lot of growth tips, like it's a little bit of a journey to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I don't have it. I've never released one. And there's probably a multitude of reasons for that, but of course there is. It's one I definitely need to get back on the farm.
Yeah.
I'd like to have something, all of the more common names of acros, I'd love to have eventually a bank of them.
Yeah.
And then spread them around to everybody.
I think you'll be able to. You should be able to get it from most of the mariculture farms. Like I know that Bally Aquarium has it on their list. So
they do.
You can get it.
They do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I agree. Like, I think I wouldn't say it's a hard coral to keep alive, but to really get fast growth and optimal coloration, I'm going to put it at like a 6 in my world. And par, I would say it's kind of good in 300 to 400 sort of LED par.
Yeah. I mean, It can handle pretty much.
Yeah.
The chances of it getting discolored by having it under, say, 250 to 300 par is unlikely, but they are definitely going to shine with the higher par levels, and that's the case with I'd say 90% of the acros.
Yeah, totally. Okay, Muricata. So this is one of the first species of acros I think Jamie Craig's had spawning, and he's even spliced genotypes with it too, which is super cool.
It's very cool.
It's very similar to Formosa, so I don't know unless you have anything to note about it, I would just say we kind of put it in the same classification.
I hope I'm not wrong by saying this because I'm just remembering Vincent in a conversation that I had with Vincent after last year's anniversary dive trip for Jake over in Indonesia. If I'm pretty sure this is the coral he saw that Vincent was talking about. I'm pretty sure it was Muricata. But Julian Sprung had just been stuck on this huge, massive colony of Muricata, and Vincent was like, "What are you looking at that ugly brown stuff for?" And Julian said, "It reminds me of Severcornis from the Caribbean." And that's why he was staring at, checking it out, was because it looks so similar to the Acropora Severcornis that lives down here in the Keys. But it's a unique growth pattern per se compared to Formosa. It is a staghorn, but it's different. And the way bigger colonies get, it's kind of mesmerizing if you can get to see a colony of it in the wild. Because that's what I always liked about the Cervicornis from the wild, is they just are so unique in how they grow. Like I've been to Indonesia diving, seeing staghorns, and it's just so different. And Muricata is very similar to the growth and way Severcornis is in the Caribbean. But it's just kind of cool that the ugly brown coral was the coral that Julian was geeking out over.
Well, because that's interesting, because Florida is just like so far away from there. So for something to have kind of evolved to kind of be like, that kind of looks similar to that, like it's kind of crazy. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It's a cool coral. I don't really know of any that I have. I'm pretty sure I don't have any Muricata. But if I remember correctly, it's rare to find anything other than basically brown with white tips.
Yeah. Okay. That's probably why we don't really see it much in the hobby then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's the exception to the rule. There's Colin Ford has a colony of toxic neon green Severcornis growing in one of the canals in Miami. In a canal.
Yeah.
And I remember Colin talking about that there was just this never seen it before anywhere else, but it's there. And unfortunately, it's so protected, you can't even touch it. But it should be something that is harvested, not the whole thing, but part of it harvested, so it can be understood and why is this one toxic green. You know, just like you see something cool with the Muricata over in Indonesia. Why is it so different than 99% of it? Mm-hmm. But that's what we love about this. I mean, we only take a top 10% of the color of corals. Everything else is brown and green. We don't want that.
Yeah.
We take the genotypes have good color.
Might even be less than 5 or 10%. It might be like 0.02%. I don't know.
You've been there. You've seen what I've seen, and it's I say 10% is a basic number, but that's the easy way to comprehend it. Yeah. You say 5%, and people are like, "Huh, that's not hardly anything." But I guess that's the way we should. But 10% is not much at all when you look at the vastness of the reefs in the world. That's why it's upsetting to hear that collecting is over harvesting the reefs when we only want 10% of the colored stuff.
Yeah, that's a misconception. And actually, I've got some of the scientist and the someone that runs the farm facility at Monsoon Aquatics coming up. So I'm going to get into some of that stuff of their harvesting and what they can take, and that should be interesting. It'll be my first Aussie guests, so it should be a fun combo. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Very cool. Okay, so the next stags that we could touched on this a bit, but Robusta and Abrotonites. So you said that the Robusta, the thing we called Abrotonites is now just Robusta. Correct. Okay. And the thing that we called Abrotonites is Hoaxamai? The thing that we called Hoaxamai is Abrotonites. That's weird. Why don't you just give it a new name? I'm pretty again, I'm not 100% on that. I'm pretty sure that's what Vince and I were having a discussion about. Yeah. Was that Hoaxamai is Abrotonites. It'll always be Hoaxamai to me. Yeah. Okay, so let's for all intents and purposes say Robusta, and it's a pretty cool stag because it's like super thick branches. The coralites have this really interesting scale shape to them, and the tip can be, it's almost like a watermelon color combination. You got this like pink red tip with like this green metallic kind of branch, and they used to bring them in a lot in mariculture shipments, and there weren't that many people that could keep the color. I wouldn't say anybody could keep the color as good as when they came in. What's your experience with them? Cook them. If you don't cook them, you're not going to get the color. In Candidasa, I dove next to a colony of standard Robusta that was bigger than, I mean, you could put 5 or 6 full Chevy Suburbans beside each other, stack one on top of it, and then put them down the side so you have one going lengthwise, then 2 going down. I mean, it was massive. It was the biggest colony I've ever seen. And then literally 50 yards away from it was another colony that was blue tipped with the green, which was not very common. But Vincent's like, hey, we don't have that one on the farm. He's like, I didn't even know this colony was here. And he's dove the reef dozens of times. So there are different color variants, because I always thought it was one where there was kind of one general genotype that, had that sort of pink and green, but there might be a different color variant too. That's where I had kind of an argument. Not an argument. It was a debate more so. But I mean, he was calling it Robusta. I was saying it was Abrotonites. He said, no, it's now all Robusta. And then I'm looking at Robusta, and what they're saying is Robusta. And then I'm looking at other corals, and I'm like, well, Abrotonites has this, doesn't have this perfect blunt tip to it like Robusta does. And Abrotonites has kind of like this thick branch that has, looks like multiple. It's like, if you look at Acropora palmetta, it doesn't have just one axial coralite. That's what makes me wonder if it really is Acropora. It is obviously, but it's like efflorescence, where's the axial coralite? It's around all the growth rim. So it's very distinct with, the ones that I remember seeing with Abrotonites, and then the ones that I always knew as Robusta came to a central coralite, an axial, and then were like blunt tipped. Anyway, it is what it is. I mean, it's all been reclassified as Robusta anyhow. Yeah. So
it's still so difficult, but it's keeping them alive. I've kept them. I had this red one. It was just solid red. There was no green in it. The growth was red. Everything was amazing. And I was cooking it under a 400 watt 65K HQI. And it was doing extremely well. I don't have any idea what happened to it, but all of a sudden I came in one day and it was completely gone. Like it was on a 4-inch tile, getting a good base. I only had probably a 1/2 inch to an inch to go on all the sides before it was growing over the side. And the thick main branch started growing out too. And it just melted. And explain that one. It's just like I, used to always say that's Acropora for you. I'm still not convinced that that's just the norm, but it's not an easy coral.
I think, like you say, the high par probably has a big part to do with that coloration and also fast growth, because the faster the growth, the less dense the zooxanthellae is going to be towards the growth tip, so you're going to get more extension of that pink color or whatever. But also they come in and they're so metallic too. Like they just look freaking awesome when they first come in.
I agree. You know who's got a really badass one growing out in his tank right now? Sanjay.
Oh yeah, nice.
Sanjay, he sent me a piece of it, and I just said, okay, grew under LEDs. It's going to take forever for it to grow, but Sanjay's a different animal. He runs his lights at 100%. On all channels, and I tell you what, that thing didn't stop growing. It just took off. And
I'll have to ask him to send me. I'll see if he can send me a video. I can put it in here.
He just put a video up on Facebook with it on not long ago. But I commented going, dude, in 7 months, 8 months, that thing's like quadrupled in size, and it's pretty badass. Yeah, it's a nice coral.
Cool. So I would say we're going to agree that it's a pretty difficult coral, and not in that, like, I think people can keep it alive, but to really get the coloration, I'm going to actually put it on the high side, like a 9.
Easy.
Yeah.
Easy 9. I would even say 10, and it's really for somebody that is an expert. I mean, I will never stop trying it. Now that I've gotten Sanjay that's grown out in captivity, I think it's going to be a little bit better. But maricultures they're going to be tough. But it's not impossible to keep them. I mean, I know people that have, Pierre at the Coral Corral down here in Tampa, he's got 4 or 5, colonies of it growing out. And that was from maricultures that he had gotten in. Color is not exactly like it should be. It's too dark. Yeah. But Sanjay's is freaking bright green and pink tips. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool. It's I would say the thickest stag as far as like what it wants to do quickly. It's just like it wants to be a thick branch. So yeah,
it does for sure.
Yeah.
Difficult.
Yeah, totally. But cool coral. So the next set here, big popular species. I grouped these together. See if you agree if they kind of have similar care. Tortuosa, Ostreara, and Gomezi. I would say are all pretty much in the same, like they're like a semi-stag, kind of like what we talked about with the Convexa. Like they're a little more of a bushy stag than a stag.
Not the ones I have. They're lanky, long branches. They're stags. But what's cool about the Tortuosa is they are very irregular, thin corallites, where the Ostreara is very irregular but fatter corallites and not as long. Shorter, stubbier corallites. Tortuosa, longer, thinner corallites. But I have an Oregon tort that doesn't branch. It just has these. I mean, it's literally growing like this. It's got 2 or 3 branches in the center section. It's like this big around, and then the branches are growing up, but they're like at the width, they're like 5-6 inches apart, and there's nothing down in between. So there's a lot of water flow that goes between it. It's a really cool coral for me. I mean, but again, it all depends on flow. I was over at Mark Levinson's, and he's got the Cali tort, and because of where it was growing in his aquarium, it grew like a table in acro. And he's like, no way, that's not a Tortuosa. And I'm like, Mark, it's a Cali tort. He's like, I used to have Cali tort. He's like, but no way, he won't believe me. But I said, take a frag and stick it where there's not all that intense flow and watch it grow like it's Tortuosa.
Yeah,
but they can grow in some really cool patterns.
Yeah, I think it comes down to that thing. It's similar, like we were talking about with Convexa, where the flow is really going to determine the growth structure. Like it's a little more of an open canvas in terms of what it can do, depending on what the conditions are. It's kind of like in terms of Tortuosa, it's pretty adaptable, like for flow and like the Oregon tort to me has always looked like a different species than the Cali tort. Like, you know what I mean? Like the Oregon tort's got this more like bottle shaped axial corallite, and I don't know, the corallites are a little different shape. So I wouldn't have even thought it was a Tortuosa, but I mean that's what we've been calling it for so long.
My personal opinion is it is the only true Tortuosa, along with the immortal Tortuosa. I think the Cali tort is what is no longer a species, Gomezi. I think that's what that's what it is. I think it's Gomezi, what we used to think of as Gomezi, but now, if I remember correctly from what Vincent said, Gomezi is no longer. So I don't know. I can't, again, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what he said. So Gomezi is gone, but it's definitely different. The Miyagi tort, Cali tort, and what's the other one? There's another Tortuosa, supposedly Tortuosa, but I think it's a completely different species. I think what we have as Tortuosa is the Oregon and Jake's Immortal.
Yeah, I've got one I call the West Coast tort that's more of a turquoise blue, and it looks identical in growth and corallite structure to the Cali tort, just a different color variant. So whatever they are, I would say they're the same, but I totally agree that Oregon tort, which we both can probably agree is one of the best all-time classic corals.
Yes.
I would say it is definitely a different species, and you might be right. It might actually be the authentic true tort, but it'd be cool if somebody can confirm, if anybody knows. We gotta just do some DNA sequencing. Just go ahead and do that. Cool. Thanks dude. So
maybe down the road Gene will have his DNA sequencing working as Reef Labs grows, which would be really cool. Because then you can send in your samples to have DNA sequencing done, so you can find out exactly what you got.
Man, you're gonna be so annoying if he does that. you're gonna be asking him all the time. Hey, dude,
no, I'll be broke.
This one. Oh yeah, if he's charging you, then for sure.
I'm sure that he'll help me out where he can, but the amount of samples that I would give him would just be he would probably do a lot of it in the beginning as learning how to use the equipment and stuff, totally. And then I'd have to start paying eventually.
Totally. Yeah. So I'm gonna do a different I think difficulty on tort versus Ostreara, because I think Ostreara are one of the easiest acros. I would put them at like a 2 or a 1. Like they're right in that easiest range, hard to kill. But I would put torts a little higher up. Like I would probably call them like still an easy coral, but maybe more like a 4 or a 5, just because like you really do need the right flow and conditions to get the proper color and whatnot.
100%.
Yeah.
I agree. Completely agree.
Yeah. And something I would say about the blue type of torts or Gomezi is they're almost like a test kit for your fluoride and your potassium. And if you're not getting those colors, and maybe you haven't done an ICP in a while, like that might be a thing to check. But I really noticed, like even Chris Wood told me this. He said this is the least scientific thing I've ever heard him say. He's like, well, if you want to just like see where your fluoride's at, just look at your blue corals, and when they look like they can't take any more blue, then your fluoride's probably good. And this is the guy that's like the most educated scientific guy. It's just like, right? See how blue they can get, and then you're good to go.
Well, I mean, that really is a huge indicator. I mean, I remember when fluorine, I wasn't putting any fluoride in my water other than what was going in from my salt, and I know for a fact it was low. And then I started putting like quarter of a dose for what Chris's instructions said. I put a quarter of a dose in, and immediately in like 3 to 4 weeks, the blues were just ridiculous. And I was putting that in every single day. So I didn't bump it up, and the blues haven't changed color. They just still look the same. But I have something that I'm trying to understand what it actually is. It was supposed to be Jason Fox's Homewrecker. Well, the coral lights are hot pink with whites on, but they're blue as blue can be when just the blues are on. And I remember Homewrecker before, they were pink, and they were pink as well when the blues were on. And I'm trying to wrap my head around what this coral is doing.
Like
is the fluorine level getting up there?
Like it's visually appearing different under different lighting, or it's just overall expressed differently?
I personally think it looks better under the white lighting than it does under the blue lighting.
Yeah.
When the Homewrecker is under the whites, at least the one I think is Homewrecker, I didn't label the bottom of the tile. Should have. Like I said, in a white light, it is pink as pink can be on the coral lights, and under blues, it's just straight blue and bright green in the body. It's gorgeous coral, but I don't think it's actually the Homewrecker. But I can't find the Homewrecker anywhere, and I know I put it in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's probably it. I mean, it's a pretty variable coral as far as my experience with it. Yeah, for sure. Okay, are we good? Is there any other stags you want to talk about, or are we? I think we're good on stags, and we gave a care level for the torts and stuff. So, just one more thing I'd say about Ostreara, just to compare it to Tortuosa, is we might have said this too, is it's a little more staggy. Like it seems to want to branch out and be more like a stag form, whereas the torts kind of stay a little tighter.
Maybe it's just the conditions that mine are in, but mine are growing really tight and branchy, but really tight. Not like when you get Gomezi in on Americulture, they're like a ball.
Yeah.
Big branches sticking up out of it. This is so tight. And the base of it is solid, but it could be from fragging it so many times as well. But I mean, I don't really get long branches out of it. But it is a popular seller for us as well too. So
it responds really well to fragging. Like, it's one of those things where you cut off one head and you get, I mean, I'm saying head in a joking way, but you cut off one, you can cut off the animal's head and then 7 heads grow back,
Well, that's what I mean. You can cut a fist-sized chunk off of some of the ones I have. And, that's basically taking a head of coral right there. There's plenty of polyps in it.
Yeah.
But, easy coral.
Yeah.
Ostreara is definitely one of the best ones. And, there's a couple different genotypes out there. I think the most, for me, the best one that I've seen is the Sunbeam that we have.
Which I think is like the WWC yellow tips. I think that's kind of,
I have
is that
both
similar?
Of them.
Yeah.
It's similar. I have both of them. Then when they're both growing right next to each other, they're distinctly different. Mm-hmm. The Sunbeam is more, it doesn't have as much purple, and it's more of a bluish tip instead of the purple tip. And the yellow doesn't really come down that far. It's where the Sunbeam has like yellowish throughout the entire body. It's like lighter green.
Okay.
It's really nice.
I'll have to get that one. And I have one that's just, I call it yellow Ostreara. That's like just a bright sort of yellowy green Ostreara, and it just grows like a weed. Actually, it gets a little bit of a purple
skin.
Little purple polyp towards the axial tips for whatever reason.
Gotcha.
And then as it grows, it just turns green. But yeah. Okay, we're going to
get... I was wondering if the ORA frog spin was Ostreara, but I don't think it is.
Oh, yeah, I remember that coral. It could be. Okay, let's go to stubby here. We both, I think, have a soft spot for the stubby corals. So I grouped them together because I think the care is very similar for them. So Humilis would be kind of one of the most recognizable, but also disputable. Gemifera, I think is how you say the next one, and Monticulosa. Yeah, so they're kind of like, I would almost classify them like a bushy acro, but they kind of, I don't know, would you say as they get big, do they sort of have you seen massive colonies of them in the wild? Do they plate or table at a certain point?
No. They
just stay like a big ball.
They do. They kind of do plate a little bit, but it's not enough. I've seen colonies that were growing kind of like off of a main base, and then they have this area underneath, but it's not that high off the reef. Like it was low tide, fully exposed, the colony. So it did have some growth over top of like a divot in the top of the reef, but know if I've seen any that are growing, like you said, that are kind of like plating and are off the substrate. Mm-hmm. Pretty much always growing across the substrate, but they can get massive. I mean, some of the colonies that, that I remember seeing pictures of in Fiji were, bigger than my room, and just flat.
Yeah.
But they took up the entire area of that reef because it was exposed at tide. And I think that has a lot to do with why there's such a stubby growth pattern, where Humulus is going to be in the right there at the tide zone, at the low tide zone, mm-hmm. where Gemifera is going to be where it will be exposed on a regular basis because it's shorter and their branches are fatter. And that's why I always was skeptical whether Gemifera and Humulus were even different species, whether they were the same species, just one was growing on the reef and getting exposed at low tide all the time, and the other one's growing where it doesn't get exposed, so it grows,
Yeah, that's a little
Samoensis,
bit like we were saying it was with the Millies versus Spathulatas, where they ended up actually being the same species, but there was just the genotype had expressed itself differently in the deeper waters. So you could be right. I mean, we'll see if we get more info on these, but yeah.
I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
But that's probably the least of people's concern is Humulus, Gemifera, Monticulosa, because they're super difficult. I mean, it's probably... I'm going to bet that it is, Humulus Gemifera is the top of the list for the most difficult coral probably to keep in captivity if you want color. 99% of the time, they're brown. I mean, if I see them growing in an aquarium, they're brown or they're green. Mm-hmm. And they're like not a bright green, a dark green, But the ones that we used to get out of Fiji years ago were just so incredibly beautiful with multiple colors in them. And, we just can't reproduce the wave action that they get, and we can't reproduce the light. And
well, I have a different experience with one type that I've been farming it. I have lost it before, but I've been farming it for about 5 years, and it's actually not on my website right now because I had lost it, and then now I grew it back again. I call it Smoke Show, but it's purple, and it has this orange towards the inner branches, and it gets like a yellow-green tip to it. And I think it's a Humulus.
That's cool.
But it's a cool piece, and it seems really resilient at this point. But like I say, it's been in captivity, at least between me and the couple of people that we've had backups between, for probably 6 or 7 years at least. So,
okay, how thick are the branches? That's going to be
they're thin, factor. They're not thick like the kind of Indo that they call Humulus that I've seen. So. Maybe that's
probably Samoensis.
Okay, Samoensis. So let's add that to the list. And actually I could quickly send you a link to.
That's my favorite Fiji Acropora is Samoensis, and it only comes out of Fiji from what I know. It's so similar to Humulus, but so much thinner. Mm-hmm. But the actual corallite structure is almost identical. So you have a thinner branching coral that might only get as thick as your index finger or middle finger in diameter, where Humulus is almost always thumb plus thickness. And then Gemifera is just short, and then I've seen those branches, as they're sticking up, the nubs be 1.5 inches in diameter, but then stick up 1.5 inches, and that's all it is.
Yeah, I think you're right. So take a look. I actually just texted these to you. So tell me what you think. These are the same coral actually at different times, where it looks a little different now. But that's from Fiji, probably. Yeah, something like 6 years ago at least.
So the original picture is the one from.
These are the same coral, just, like a year apart.
It's Samoensis.
Yeah, that's Samoensis.
100% Samoensis.
Okay. Yeah, and that's common from Fiji and super cool coral. Yeah.
Yes. I'm excited because I haven't seen it in so long. And that was one of the things when I got my Fiji order and I said to Walt, I wanted Samoensis. Mm-hmm. I got 0. Mm-hmm. Oh. I got no Samoensis. I was so upset.
Man, I wish I could send you some stuff easily too, but I just got a new one in this Fiji shipment, and it's like turquoise, kind of a turquoisey blue it's like turquoise with blue polyps. So it's going to be a cool one for sure. Yeah. And it could be that this is an easier coral to farm than those super fat, thick stubbies.
Yes.
It's a narrower stubby. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, yeah, I haven't really seen anybody have a Humulus and they can be really cool tricolor morphs, but I haven't seen any kicking around in the hobby for years and years where, it's been, a long-term farmed and traded coral. So that'll tell you.
Years ago, I remember a nice toxic green when I was floating around Florida area. Nobody wanted it because it was basically like a yellow green with a purple tip. I loved it because it was, the way it was growing was like a big flat, but all these stubby nubs sticking up all over it, and it was getting a heck of a lot of flow. And the colony was pretty big, if I remember correctly. Pierre at the Coral Corral actually has a nice colony of it still growing in his aquarium, but it's been in captivity for about 10 or 15 years, and it grows really well. And it does look like Humulus when it gets to proper flow.
Yeah.
That's the problem with him, is he can't leave things alone. So he moves his stuff around constantly. So it's got all this weird gnarly growth because it's been moved probably 10 times in the last year. It doesn't get to continue to grow out the way it should because it's a big colony. And he's like, I can move this, shift it a little bit this way, shift it a little bit that way. So he can keep adding pieces because he's got a little bit of an addiction, like, most people like you and me have with all of our corals.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say you have a Samoensis for sure. It's
okay.
A beautiful piece. Love to get my hands on it at some time. Yeah, sweet.
Yeah. So, and the Gemifera, I think I see that coming out of Australia. So, like the stubby, I haven't seen maybe something they call Humulus as much come from Australia, but I've seen those on the CITES. It says Gemifera, so it's still them just making an approximation to call it something on the CITES, right. But maybe that's what they've assessed they have there. Yes. But okay. So let's say for those true thicker type ones like the Humulus, you think the care level is really high on them? Hey, you would put it at a 9 or a 10?
Oh yeah, I mean, just they're so demanding when it comes to the amount of water flow that they need to keep their color properly. If you want them to grow like they're supposed to and color up like they're supposed to, they need a lot of intense light on the lower end of the Kelvin spectrum. You're talking, 65 to 10K is best lighting for those corals. Yeah. I have a red one that Vincent sent me, and I cannot wait for these 1,000-watt halides to go in because it's red, but it's not what it was when the day it came in. I mean, when it came in, I was like, holy shit, he wasn't lying. It is a red Humulus. And I haven't been able to get that red back in it, but I think these halides, I mean, I'm hoping I get, 1,000 par on the damn thing by the time it's all said and done.
Well, it should be interesting. You might, hopefully you see some results that you've never seen before, maybe getting
it's not growing fast.
Yeah. So I can't really give a number on the true Humulus because, I haven't kept a lot of them before. I have had them before, but, I can't say, that was when my system was at its best, and I can't really, with my current experience, weigh in on it. But I'm going to agree they're in the higher difficulty range. But the what was the one you said mine was? This Samoensis?
Samoensis.
Yeah, I would say that's, for me, is more like a 5 or something. It's not a difficult coral. So
yeah, no, Samoensis is pretty easy. ACI started with Fiji acros. I used to frag up Samoensis all the time, and it was one of the fastest growing corals we would make fragments of. And I never had issues keeping color in it either.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's still some of those frags floating around. So somebody bought one that's had it long term. That was 20 years ago, 18 years ago.
It's funny. It's just you just need a few people to do a really good job,
I know, right?
Keep it around. Yeah. Not a big ask. Come on, guys. Yeah. Okay, cool. I think we're into deep waters. We got Carduus, Echinata, Locani, Loripes, Granulosa. I think let's start with the kind of Carduus Echinata types because I'd say pretty similar care for those. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. They don't need tons of light. The Loripes is, I don't believe, at all in this being considered a deep water.
Yeah, let's talk about that after, actually, because Carduus and Echinata would be closer. Although I would say Echinata can take more light than Carduus can. I think Carduus should be in the kind of, in terms of LED range, it can be fine at 100 par, and it can be fine at probably up to 250, 300. But you might as well just not put it in that super ultra high spot because it's going to color up and do well anyways. Whereas Echinata, like the Hawkins Echinata and this other teal Echinata I have, they can handle 400 if they're adapted to it over time.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's Echinata. There's so many corals that were called Echinata, and the Hawkins is not an Echinata. That's a Taraki.
You think? Yeah.
100%.
Because I've had Taraki, and I thought the coralite structure and growth structure looked really different.
Yeah, Vincent and I had a discussion about it. So did Jake and I. We were pretty convinced that it was Taraki. But then I was at the studio, and Jake and I were looking at ACI, which is another deep water that is so similar to Taraki. Also similar to Speciosa or Botone. Mm-hmm. It's hard to say, but Acropora LCI has blue tips, has the green body, and then Jake had another version of it that was red.
Interesting. Huh.
Which was an LCI. And then he had a lot of stuff that he was calling Speciosa or Botone. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure they were not Speciosa. Like Vincent actually sent me a picture the other day of I'm digressing here. Let's talk about these first few, and then I'll go into what I was going to say about Vincent. But it has to do with Speciosa. So Carduus.
Yeah. So like that's kind of like the red dragon and the needle in a haystack kind of common names. The little red Ferrari types, right?
Yeah, you know what? I don't agree with that, and I put a big argument up with Vincent about it because Carduus, from what I remember, I first got Carduus out of Australia, and it was blue or green, and it was much thicker, much shallower when it was collected. Grows in fields where Carduus, that Vincent calls Carduus, and what I think others are calling Carduus, are something different. But again, I'm not a scientist, but the Carduus that was described out of Australia looked just like the pictures of the one in Verone's book. And the Carduus that I saw come in, I'm like, that's just too thin to be Carduus, but it's a deep water. And if it is the same species, it's growing in different conditions, it could just be thinner.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and one thing about the Hawkins Echinata is it puts out like crazy amounts of growth tips. Like mine is just so clustered together, and other things that I have as like an Echinata are a much like wider spread of the branch growth. So I mean, to me, I think you could be right that it's not Echinata. It's just like it was such an early named coral from ORA that it's kind of embedded into our minds as being the species. So then
it's like tenuous will never go away.
Yeah. It's like telling me that I can't call Cabernet Sauvignon, anymore. Oh, we call it this now.
Right.
It's like, God damn it. Yeah.
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 But but when it comes to the Carduus, the Echinata, Awi is now Echinata. Still can't get past that one because I like the Echinata.
Interesting, because we can get to that because I have Awi on the list, but I considered that a completely different species for care because I've had those red Awis from Bally Aquarium, and they're very difficult and really sensitive to light. Yeah.
Again, when it gets down to this deeper water stuff, there's so much confusion.
Yeah,
And I like having a good debate about it because it's what makes this fun. But I don't know, what would be considered Carduus. Is it? But there's so many deep water species that are going through my head right now, and one of them is not Exquisita. It's Elegance.
Yeah.
Acropora Elegance,
which is a super deep water piece.
Yeah, Acropora. What's the other one? Tunella.
I don't think I know that.
That
one.
one's even.
Yeah.
That one's even deeper water. 100. Vincent collected me mine of it 135 feet of water.
Yeah.
And it's a unique piece, but I mean, I think I don't know. I'm kind of don't know where to go with the deep waters. To be honest with you, they're difficult for anybody to keep. in my opinion. Once you have them though, and you get them settled in, then they're not too bad.
Yeah.
But initially they can be quite difficult.
Yeah, and I think that most of them can be adapted to higher par, but it's
100%.
a safe bet to start them out low and move them up. And you know, like most of my ones that I sell at this point, like I can kind of put them anywhere in the tank, and they're not going to bleach. Like they can handle the light I hit them with. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. But and the Hawkins Echinata, one of my favorite OG old school pieces. It's an awesome piece.
100%.
Yeah.
I can't grow it.
No?
I don't know why. I got 15 frags from Keith at Reef Bum.
Yeah.
And they were doing great. They weren't growing, but they were doing great. And then just for no reason, every other coral around the entire area is growing, happy, doing great, and one of these will die. Another one will die. Another one will die. Dip them, clean them, microscope them, nothing. Mm-hmm. And just can't figure out what I'm doing wrong with the Hawkins Echinata.
Yeah. Yeah, and one thing
but we all have our nemesis.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I know for sure about the Hawkins is it cannot be dipped in those oil kind of pine oil kind of base dips.
No.
It will absolutely peel. Even a small, short, less concentrated dip, bad idea. Just stick to potassium chloride or, in your case, the iodine dips might do it too. Or Bayer.
Yep.
Bayer is probably fine as well, even though I try to not touch that stuff.
I don't touch that stuff for the 10-foot pole.
Yeah, totally agreed.
Yeah.
I put I put that in the list, and that is a pretty cool species, but I think it can be mixed up a little bit because I've seen Saharsonoi, or maybe it was Caroliana that came in, and it was a blue version, and then I've seen things called Yeah. Okay, so that is what it is. Yeah. So
the blue version is of Caroliana is Locani.
Yeah. Okay. Which is cool piece.
And Caroliana comes in a bunch of different colors, but I don't remember ever seeing it with blue. You go to Saharsonoi, that's my all-time nemesis freaking coral. I don't know why I have problems with that coral, but I know we'll get there in a second, so I'll tell the story in a minute.
Actually, before we move on to that, let's give a difficulty rating for Carduus and then Echinata. So for what we recognize as Carduus, the red dragon types, I'm going to say it's like a 5. Like it's not really hard, but I wouldn't say it's an easy coral. It's fairly easy.
It's easy, I say that, but here's the problem with it. And everybody that I've ever seen have big colonies, basketball size colonies grow out. They, because of their irregular growth pattern, they're one of the ones that are really affected by flow as they grow. Mm-hmm. The interior of the colony will be dead and the rest of the colony will look amazing. Yeah. And over time, that interior part of the colony will just collapse. Yeah. So they're great, but don't be disappointed when the whole thing collapses on you at some point.
Yeah,
because it's going to happen.
Kind of have to consider, boosting your flow as the colonies grow. Like you have to be on top of that for them to really thrive long term and to get to be massive colonies.
Oh,
yeah.
Let's touch that real quick. I think that's one of the biggest things that people don't realize happens in a reef aquarium is the water displacement that happens by the growth, for one, and then the flow pattern getting shifted and changed as the corals grow. In the wild, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it does, but it's not even noticeable to the corals because we can't reproduce that energy that the waves
it's like
producing.
Water pressure is what is happening in the reef. It's finding a way no matter what. Whereas with us, we have these limitations because it's just A, B, C, D factors, So, yeah, I agree for sure.
So that's something to be very vigilant on somebody new getting into SPS corals. Just make sure that you, when you have your water flow where you're happy with it and the corals are doing great, remember, you're going to have to add more as your tank matures. And you have to start thinking about that immediately as you see corals growing before it's too late. Because when it's too late, then it's too late. Yeah. They start dying. So, as your reef matures, definitely add more flow to it to keep everything happy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, okay, Echinatas I put in a similar difficulty range, if we're going to call them, I don't know, that group of species in general. Yeah, I would say they're like
definitely
4 or 5.
Up there.
You'd say Echinata is a little harder?
I say 6.
Yeah.
I say 6.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough one to keep good color in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting, because, the Hawkins Echinata, I've always grown just boatloads of it, just...
Yeah. It's different. That's what I'm saying. Like a real true, like, ice and fire type Echinata,
that's a good point.
Difficult coral to actually get to grow up.
Yeah, the ice fire Echinata from Australia, I'm going to put right on par with the Batunae. Yeah. Batunae.
Yeah, yes.
I'm going to put it up there with Batunae.
Difficult.
It's difficult. Like an 11. It's off the scale hard.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And people, I don't know if you noticed, but you don't see it coming in anymore.
I got some recently from Oz. I actually got some.
Oh, you did?
Some mini wild
That's
colonies. Cool. Yeah. But one of them was DOA. 2 of them are holding on. One of them receded slowly and I fragged it up. But it's a hard coral. It's definitely, the max of what you can try to keep as far as acros are concerned.
100%.
Yeah. And
100%.
it's probably a different species just based on the fact that it's from Australia and its care requirements are clearly different than other things that we've given that name to.
It is the true definition of a real bottle brush. I mean, that coral, the Awi, Echinata, if you've ever seen a bottle brush and you see a wild piece of this, it's rounded on the tips. You can't hardly tell where the axials are. And it just looks like a big, long brush. It's pretty freaking badass. It's one of my favorite corals. I've had so many different pieces of it. And, I'm going to refer to Jake going, dude, that is the nicest Echinata I ever saw. And I wish he never would have said that because I think I lost it about 3 months later. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
the admiring curse. The admiring curse that happens. Yeah.
That thing's damn ugly.
Yeah.
You got to talk shit about your favorite piece of coral because if not, it's going to die.
Yeah.
So definitely up there on the hard list. Locani. Okay. Definitely, or Locani, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. That's another difficult piece, in my opinion.
Slow grower, too.
I don't know. I don't know of anybody that has a big colony of it. No. I mean, I don't. I mean, I had a nice colony of it, and that's another piece that Jake admired so much. Put it in his article, put it in his video. It is no longer in my facility, and it makes me sad. But then we go to difficulty on Locani is definitely going to be up there in the 8-9 range, maybe 10.
Yeah. Just because it's also just a hard coral to grow. Like you say, you don't see any big colonies of it. And I noticed from fragging it and cutting it, it's a very dense skeleton. It's really hard to cut. So, that tells you something, right?
It gets extremely pissed when you frag it. It heals over, but then does not grow. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, my colony was probably softball size.
Yeah.
And I was loving how beautiful it was getting. And that was what I liked about it was the tips to the body. It's just the huge difference in intensity. And then that bright green axial correlate.
Yeah.
Just the axial correlate was just always bright green. It was beautiful.
I don't know if I saw it with that, but another thing to say about Locani or Locani is some of the really nice deeper water looking corals coming from Malaysia are being classified as Locani. I am certain they've got to be a different species, but there's some really cool morphs of those coming in that are like these bright kind of metallic orange or orange and purples and whatnot. So I hope we get some more clarity on the corals coming from Malaysia, but it's I
hope they stop coming.
Controversial region. So,
it is. I hope they stop coming because why aren't we bringing them directly into Canada from Malaysia? Why aren't we bringing them directly into the United States from Malaysia? That's a big question mark and a big problem for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see how this unfolds and we'll probably tread lightly around the, the importing.
All is good.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. So we, I don't know. Did you think these could go together, Loripes and Granulosa? Like I kind of always thought of them as similar care requirements, but,
yeah, they're both very shallower water species too. I mean, Loripes is collected out of Fiji. That's where the most common Loripes come from.
Yeah.
And they're in super shallow water. They're not using scuba gear to go collect the acroporas in Fiji. The water's too shallow, it's too clear, and there's acros everywhere. Mm-hmm. And Granulosa also comes out of, well, it doesn't come out of Fiji, but it's 50 feet of water and shallower from what I've known. But again, it doesn't mean it doesn't come from deeper water as well. But telltale signs of a Granulosa most of the time, or you see, if it's in the wild, you see it, pink tips when they're actually blue.
Yeah, and that's how it looks under natural sunlight. Yeah,
they're extremely gorgeous.
Lots of color variants too. Like I think even some cool tricolors. Or there's some nice ones being farmed now for sure.
But it's like you put it into the category of smoothie, per se, versus deep water.
Yeah, smoothie. Skin. Yeah.
There's true deep water smoothies, but then there's shallow waters that are also smoothies as well, and that's definitely. Both of those are definitely on the list for smoothie. I like with Loripes, I like how the branches grow out and then you have the smooth surface on the top of the branch that's facing the sun, and then underneath is where all the corallites are coming off.
Yeah, and a little more sort of banana-shaped corallites, whereas the grannies are a little more bulbous, kind of rounded. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Both of them are very, very beautiful species.
Yeah, and I think there are species that can handle higher par, especially the grannies. I think the grannies can get blasted pretty high. Like I think Kenny Lynn was telling me some of their best grannies they hit with their top par levels, and to get some of those colors. Yeah. So, yeah, maybe
grannies and Loripes. I have Jake's blue Loripes, and it is better looking than when it was when I saw it out of the studio when I brought it home with me. Yeah, it is so intense blue, and then the underneath of where the corallites are coming out, each corallight's green. And it is just this insane. I mean, it's sapphire blue. It's so bright. It's one of my favorite corals, and I'm glad it's looking really good and growing well. But it's getting super cooked. It's between a 400 water that's here and a 250 that's here. It's kind of right in between them. And they both know the 400 stays on for 12 hours, where the 250 is only on for 6. Yeah. And I've been doing that for a little while on my one section, having one of the 400 stay on for a full 12-hour photo period for the day. And I really can't say I noticed any major differences other than, a little bit lighter in color.
Yeah. And hydrobill is up a little bit too.
Yeah,
whatever.
Like $10 a month. Only an extra $10 a month.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say care level. I'm gonna say it's a little higher, maybe on the Granulosa than the Loripes, but I could be wrong.
Yes.
I would say the grannies are maybe like, just because there's more nuances in some of the colorations.
6, 7.
It's 6 or a 7, and then I'd say the Loripes maybe like a 4 or 5.
4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yep. Right, that's exactly what I feel.
Yeah, and then is there anything else?
The next two.
Oh yeah, okay. Let's. Yeah, I don't think we have anything else to say about those. So, yeah, pretty predictable for flow and all the other things. So, yeah, Caroliana, Sahari.
Okay, 2 very difficult corals as frags to tell the difference between.
Yeah.
They're extremely difficult when you have frags of them, and that's kind of where I was in the very beginning of my Caroliana grow out from a couple of years ago. I had Saracenois and I had Carolinianas. Excuse me. And I made the mistake of putting branches that were very similar in color, not very far apart. Yeah. And as I was there, I'm like, okay, shit, which one was the granny? Which one was the Saracenoid?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it turned out that all the Saracenoids still are my nemesis coral. I have not been able to grow one for more than 4 years, and then after 4 years, they always end up dying, and I can't ever figure out why. But the Caroliana I've had now for 40 years, and I've got 2 different color morphs. One is like yellow, like neon highlighter yellow, but I'm cooking it. I'm giving it really intense. I don't know if anybody else has that same experience with a bright yellow, but I've seen green, I've seen yellow, and I've seen blue. I've never had good luck with the blues holding their color. They tend to want to grow and be brown.
Didn't we say the blues we kind of thought were the Locani, like the blue version of the Caroliniana? Wasn't that kind of what we concluded? Yeah.
I tend to agree, but there's also another form that comes as more like a purple. No. I'm sorry. That's Locani as well. It's just green. The Caroliana and I.
Yeah, and I agree.
Sahursanoi's got other colors.
Yeah, but the Caroliana, I think you can blast it with light, and it's just the greener version's just going to get more yellow. The higher par you can get away with hammering it with. So that's 100%. Where you get the best coloration for sure. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I have a few that I've farmed for quite a while, and they're just a good hardy piece and super, super metallic. Pretty decently fast grower once the colony gets to that kind of 4 or 5 inch, hits that super growth phase and you get lots of tips, then you're probably good. So yeah.
Sahursanoiing. Sahursanoiing, exactly. I had a piece of it that Vincent sent me 10 years ago, and I grew that thing and I lost it. Kept the nub, grew it back out, lost it, kept the nub. And I was doing that for the last 10 years. And I actually finally got it where it grew over an entire 4-inch tile, but did not shoot branches up at all. And then I glued that 4-inch tile in the dead center of 4 4-inch tiles. Because I wasn't touching anything. I wasn't stabbing it. I wasn't doing anything with it. I was not, because I finally got it to grow out to a decent size, but no branches coming up. So I figured if I gave it another base to grow onto, that maybe it would start to shoot some branches up. And then I also said, well, maybe if I stick it on the side, because it is a tabling type acro, maybe if I stick it on an angle, maybe that'll help it. Maybe it'll start shooting branches out like it does. Yeah. It actually worked.
Yeah. So you just propped it up on something, like on a full right angle, or like a slight
It was like
tilt?
It was a slight tilt.
Yeah.
And it was off of the top. Like I have 2 tiers in every tank. Down the middle is the top tier for the acros. So I leaned it up against the acro rack that was
from one level to the next. Yeah.
Yes. So it's still getting plenty of halide lighting, but it was getting all of the T5 lighting on the 12-hour photo period, and it seemed like it was doing extremely well. It started shooting branches out, and they were curling up, and they were getting super long, and then just started RTNing. And literally, and I started saving branch tips, and I don't know if I still have it at this point, because I can't tell if it's Caroliana growing or if it's this yellow Sahursanoy.
Yeah.
It's so difficult. And Vincent sent me a red Sahursanoy, and that did great for about 3 years, and then just literally overnight was just gone. I had a green one, and then I had one that was like a bluish.
Yeah.
And I have yet to keep a Sahursanoy alive for more than probably 10 years, but never was able to get it grown out so I could break even one good fragment off of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not a wholesaling profitable coral for you, that's for sure. But not all of them are going to be. Some of them are passion corals.
I'm not giving up.
Yeah.
I didn't say I was giving up. Yeah, I will figure it out. Yeah. And that's what I try. I try to figure these things out. So maybe I'm going to grow it in lower light from now on. Just super low light, because they come from like 90 to 100 feet of water or more.
Yeah.
So, maybe I just give it minimal light with good water flow and see if maybe the intense lighting was the stress factor that just couldn't take anymore after a while.
It could be. Could be a certain point where the bleaching is not expressed in the standard light bleaching way, but there's just an overall stress to the coral that maybe eventually just hits a threshold where something peels.
No holds barred.
Yeah.
Yep.
Who knows?
No turning back.
So Caroliana, I would say, is a bit easier, like a 4 or a 5. But the Sahursanoy, I haven't
10,
kept
11.
it long term easy either. But I mean, I would say I would put it like an 8 or a 9 for me. But again, I don't have the experience to super name, be conclusive about it. But yeah,
I'm giving it a 10, 11 for me, because it's super much a pain in my ass.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. It's my it is my favorite Acropora. And it has been for damn near 2 decades. And
cool.
I still haven't been able to keep it long enough to grow it into an absolutely stunning colony like you see in the photos.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. I just want something that's like this big, that's got all these super long coral lights, and it's just such a cool coral. I mean, just look at you turn it over, it could be a rake for your garden.
Yeah, just the shape alone. I agree, because it's like, yeah, it may not have like rainbow colors or tricolor or whatever, but it's just the shape is so cool. It doesn't look like something from this planet in some ways, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
Okay, I got a couple. We can breeze over these quickly, but these are some of the deeper waters that are, I would say, quite difficult that you can get from farms and indos. So I'm talking like the Indo Speciosa and Jacquelinea or Jacquelinea.
Jacquelinea.
Yeah. Yeah, Jacquelinea sounds about right.
Jacquelinea is what I always said.
Jacquelinea.
Vincent would know.
Yeah, he would absolutely know. He'd school us on that one. But these are kind of like, I would say, the much more deeper water.
Super difficult.
Yeah, and actually I got a Speciosa from Vincent's farm for a customer a while back, and it looked like kind of like the Ice Fire Echinata from Australia in coloration. It was kind of that white with the blue kind of ridges in the corallites, and it just looked like a sensitive coral. You got that thing and you're just like, I don't see this thing being around in a year, but if the customer wants it, I'll get it for him. But
I have one that we got from Vincent that is green and purple body, green in the corallites, and it's a friggin' weed.
Really?
Yes, I've been farming it now for 4 years, and I had it on the market for probably a year and a half, and it sold like crazy in the beginning, and it's kind of slowed down a little bit, but I've got 2 big mother colonies that are probably 9-10 inches across each. And if somebody buys a frag to order, they're getting a frag for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so it's been a weed.
I'm sending a chunk of that bad boy
and
out.
that's Speciosa. That's Indo Speciosa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know. Definitely send me a pic or a vid of that, because I don't really have something to add to this. So.
I know it's on our website under the photos that we have are on the website. Jacquelinea, though.
Yeah,
that coral, I've only gotten true Jacquelinea maybe in the last 15 years, maybe a dozen true pieces. Mm-hmm. It's such a thin, wiry growth. Like, it almost looks like a thin wire. The corallites are so thin, but they're really dense, and you'd think it would be super brittle to touch, but it's actually not bad. But it's a slow grower, and it's super difficult to keep alive. It requires a lot of water flow, and it requires very, very moderate to low light. One Jacquelinea.
Yeah.
My Speciosa from Vincent is getting cooked just with all the other corals. I held the one colony's under a 10K, getting crazy amount of light, and the other one's under a 20K, also getting crazy amounts of light. And they don't look any different.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Jacquelinea I've seen coming from Malaysia as well, and looking at the corals of the world type photos, it does look pretty similar to me as the same species, and I actually have it under pretty high par, probably like 400, and it's like it's yellow with like pinky red polyps. It's a pretty nice piece.
Very cool.
Yeah,
I'd like to see it because there's a lot of pieces, Jacquelinea is distinctly different than any other acro that I've ever seen, just like Sursinoias. Mm-hmm. Its growth pattern is extremely unique, and very super thin structure in the branches, but tight.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I'll see if I can find a pic quickly, but I don't think so. What do you think?
Nope.
You think different?
Yes.
Yeah, well, let's just probably agree almost all these Malaysian corals are probably not the right naming. They're probably all just like a bit of a guess.
That one, I don't even know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Super unique. It's very pretty.
Yeah.
I saw a really cool Salego that came out of there.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a Salego too, but it looked really cool when it came in, but it's mostly just like a yellow kind of color, with like reddish polyps.
This one had red polyps, and it had like orange on the corallites, and it had a yellow-green body.
Yeah, there was like 10 colonies that came into my supplier. They all kind of looked like that when they came in, and then I was back at the supplier like a couple weeks ago, and they all kind of looked just kind of like yellowy green with reddish polyps now. So yeah. Okay.
They go through shifting stage.
Yeah. Okay, so let's give these other deep waters a difficulty. So you think the Speciosa from Indo is actually kind of an easy one to farm for you? So would you say it's easy?
I'd say it's extremely easy. The ones coming out of the mariculture farms. But I was going to say something about a particular coral that Vincent mentioned to me. He sends me a picture the other day of a coral that I imported for Jake that Jake called the Heaven's Gate. Did you ever hear of it?
I don't think so.
He called it an Acropora Speciosa. Mm-hmm. But if you look at, my wife wrote an article in Coral Magazine called Immortal Corals, and there's a picture of the Heaven's Gate in there. I knew that Jake was, Vincent said it was a Speciosa. I said it wasn't. Jake said it was. We had a nice debate back and forth. We agreed to disagree. And then after I've watched it grow out more, I'm like, it's something completely different. Maybe it is a Locani, or maybe it's a Caroliana something, but it's a blue and purple coral. And it's a smoothie or deep water. Yeah. And Vincent sends me a picture of the exact piece that he collected that he sent to Jake and asked me if I remembered it. And I'm like, well, how the hell can I forget that coral? It's the Heaven's Gate. And he's like, yeah, it's not Speciosa. I'm like, I told you that. We had a debate about it.
Yeah.
And he goes, but I'm like, dude, you and Jake agreed that it was Speciosa, and I told you it wasn't. I said, and we just all agreed to disagree. Yeah. What is it? And he's like, I haven't figured it out yet, but it's definitely not Speciosa. He's like, I found the mecca of this coral when he was diving a couple of days before. Yeah. And he's like, I found so much of it. They're all tiny little small colonies. He's like, but it's everywhere in this one reef, which isn't far from the reef where he got the piece for Jake. But it's I guess the whole point of that is your eyes, my eyes, we see things differently. And what we think we are looking at, you could call it Speciosa, I could call it Locani. Vincent will call it Carduus. Yeah. And until we DNA it, it's still enjoyable to talk about it and, keep this going. I'm having fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just looking at this, the Heaven's Gate. And to me, it looks like a little bit like what I would think of a Locani, kind of looking like it's like a blue Locani. But it
doesn't grow like a Locani.
Yeah.
If you saw the way it grew, and that's what I said to Vincent, I'm like, there's no way it's Locani, it's not Caroliana, it's like it's something in between there. It's definitely not Speciosa. It's too smooth. It doesn't have those
way thick. It looks like thicker branches too, or thicker overall structure.
Super thin.
Yeah. Oh, is it?
That picture is the colony's small. Mm-hmm. When that photo was taken, the colony is very small. I mean, the colony when that was taken was only about as big as a teacup, not even as big as the bottom of a coffee cup.
Yeah.
It's about all the bigger it was. Now it's like this big, and it's got 3 tiers on it.
Yeah.
And it grows flat, and it's different. Whatever the heck it is, it's like, I'm like, it might be a cross between a Tenella and a Speciosa. Vincent's like, would you shut up? I'm like, hey.
I'm having fun with this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Okay, so the Jacqueline, we didn't really give a difficulty to you because it's not a ton of experience with it. But this Malaysian one, I'll say I've had for 5 months, and if it is that species, and it's so far is still alive and is colored up well, so it might be not the hardest coral, but who knows?
It is definitely what you have. I'm pretty sure, 100% positive. It's not. It's something else. What it actually is, I couldn't tell you. And if it really did truly come from Malaysia, there's so many new species out there too that we are just learning about.
Yeah.
Which all is good. I mean, the piece is nice. I love it, but I don't think it's Jacqueline.
Yeah.
It's too thick.
Yeah, sounds good. Any other final notes on deep water / smooth skins, or should we move on?
Be careful of what you are told is a deep water versus something that isn't, because they might tell you the completely wrong care levels. And that's the thing about the term deep water Acropora. Most people think because they're smooth skin that they're deep water.
Yeah.
Which is, I've seen deep waters that have that don't have a smooth type skin. I mean, look at the Speciosa. They're not super smooth. They have coral lights, but that's the main thing that I always remember as a smooth skin deep water is that smooth, sleek look to the texture of the coral because there's not as many coral lights.
Yeah.
And
that could be a growth strategy because the coral, maybe its strategy to grow is to put more growth into elongation rather than making a whole new animal every possible spot along the branch, right? It's a strategy.
The theory would be, and the theory would be that, because it is deeper water, it doesn't get as much lighting. So the more animals it has per inch of skeleton, the more light it's going to need to feed those animals properly. So, but that's not always the case.
That's not always the case,
Yeah, most deep waters are really coral light. How do you say it? Less dense
less
in
coral
lights.
Yeah, totally.
Yes, less density in coral lights.
yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. And not saying deep water or smooth skin, just less dense in coralites acros. I don't know. It's a bit of an awkward way to put it, honestly, but but I agree.
I'm following you.
Okay, so last set of acros. Speaking of strategy, I think this is a really good example of growth strategy is the plating acros. So the efflorescens, or is it efflorescens? Efflorescens and solitariensis, which the efflorescens was one of the ones when I was diving in Bali, was one of the most beautiful acros that I saw because it's just, this bright sort of purple edge on these cool scrolling, they almost in a quick glance look like a scrolling Monty or something, but they're an acro. Yeah. And the solitariensis is an even weirder version where I say it's even, I don't know, it's more like if the efflo is like a house, like the solitariensis is like an apartment building of plates or something, they're both interesting.
Smaller plates on the solitariensis, from my experience. Is that what you saw too? You saw them in the wild?
I don't know. I think I saw more efflos, but I've looked at enough pictures of both of them to kind of have a little bit of an idea of the differences. But kind of the what ends up happening is, the axial tips are so close together that they just form a plate because it just essentially radiates out from those edges.
Or solitary, efflorescens always has just solid plating. That's just a given on it. Solitariensis, the edges of the growth can really branch out. They always stay flat and tabley.
Yeah.
And over time, they kind of fuse.
Yeah.
So they can be very branchy and they'll intersect as they grow out. But then as they're growing more and more, instead of it being a holy plate, per se, it all fuses together, but the edges can be they can have a lot of character to them in a solitariensis versus an efflo is just going to be like you said, a scrolling Monty cap, but a very thick, dense growing Acropora.
Yeah. And something I've thought about efflos before is some of them look a little bit like a Veleta, like in coloration, but
they do.
The actual growth form is a plate. So, you can kind of see maybe an evolutionary pathway from if Veleta was a coral that was around first and it started growing a little bit differently and then passed on its, those characteristics. Like you could see how maybe a coral would adapt that strategy because being able to plate, and I'm going to talk about radial growth when we get to some of these other, like to LPS, but that's a really good strategy when you have this growth coming from every edge of your growth tip is shooting out, and then you can really fill a niche on the reef as far as competing for space, right? Right.
Yeah. Two very, very beautiful courses. A couple others that are just plating. One starts with a C, but it's something we'll never see in the aquarium trade because of where it comes from, and it's just brown for the most part. But I think the best solitariensis that I ever had was the deep purple one. That was just solid purple.
Yeah.
Didn't have green in it whatsoever.
Cool.
But, just for anybody that has or wants a really unique coral, that's an easy coral to keep, but you have to get it from a good source because they are notorious for acro-eating flatworms. If there's going to be any acro in your tank that has flatworms on it, it's going to be efflorescens or solitariensis.
Yeah.
It's a given.
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of a fun coral to watch grow out too. So I would agree. Buy a frag and that's from a reputable source and grow it from there. And yeah, I would say they're pretty easy. I mean, because of the plating nature, they appear to need really good flow passing through, especially to flush any detritus that might build up in the actual dinner plate part of it. But pretty easy. I would say it's like a 4 or a 5 for difficulty if you've got your flow in check. Yeah.
And you don't have any pests. It's an easy core if you don't have any problems.
Yeah.
I have one, actually it was one colony and I broke it down into 2 flat plates. And I got this stupid idea. I mean, it was the dumbest idea I ever had with mounting a coral into a tile. And I took this perfectly round colony and I mounted these 2 flat pieces like this, kind of in a V shape.
Yeah.
And I had the flow shooting straight through it. So I was hoping that I was going to see them just kind of grow up like this and grow out in a flat and have 2 perfect tables growing off either side. Well, it just ended up being a nightmare for flow. As it started growing, it was efflorescence, but it's actually growing more like a solitariensis. But then it starts to grow normally after it fills in all the gaps that it needs to fill in. It's really, and if you mount them vertically and they're a flat table and you mount them this way, they will plate off both sides.
Yeah, so you
but
get
don't
like
ever
a
mount
T.
them like this.
You get like a T shape.
Yes, and that actually makes it nice for keeping them clean because they like the crust and having it that T shape allows. You can actually hit the underside of the coral easily, so you don't have to try to settling underneath the coral, and it'll still puddle even though it's in very low light or no light. As the table goes.
Yeah, so good to get it. Make sure flow gets underneath and that it's elevated up. Yeah, that
for sure.
Sense. Yeah, cool. Sure. Okay, I think we are through the acros, so yeah, we're gonna have to. Good. Next part's gonna have to be. I don't know. We'll just keep doing these until we're done, man. If you're down.
Sounds good, buddy. Appreciate it. And it's good chatting.
Yeah, you too. Okay. Have a good night, man. Cheers.
All right. You too. You take care.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Beyond the Reef. Make sure to stay tuned for the other episodes coming out in this series. There will be at least 2 more. So we're looking forward to those for sure. If you're a retailer in the US, and you're looking for wholesale of awesome corals, you definitely should check out ACI Aquaculture.com and set up an account there. And as per usual, if you have any suggestions for future guests, want to just ask us a question, make a suggestion, make a criticism, whatever you want to say, feel free to reach out at beyondthereefpod@gmail.com. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and leave us a review. And if you're looking for high-quality aquacultured corals in Canada, please check us out at fraggarage.ca. Hope to hear from you soon.